You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Week 1 of Dominaria is in the books, and the new technology is making a big impact in Modern and Pioneer. From headliners like Leyline Binding and Liliana, to surprise standouts like Meria, Yotia Declares War, and Serra Paragon. We're tracking all of the latest developments on today's episode. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am David Robertson, coming to you from the Twin Cities, and I am joined not by the CEO of the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am joined by Mordekaiser himself. He is Morde to Light on Twitter.com. Morde, what is going on, my friend?
All good. How about you, bud? Just doing perfectly around. Sad that the CEO couldn't join us, but he's in the middle of a lot, so it's us to keep the cost going.
Yeah, exactly. He is moving. His jet-setting lifestyle is catching up with him, and it's up to us who truly love the people to keep giving them what they want.
Exactly. We have to keep the brews going. We have to keep the content going, and there's no other way to do that than just writing together. So we have a lovely episode for you today, guys. Likely these two next episodes alongside me and David, and then we get joined once again by the Serum Visions gang.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about all of the new Dominaria United 5.0s, interesting tech from the weekend challenges in both Modern and Pioneer. And then on our Monday episode, we are going to look at our new card, which is Other Chandler. And we are going to revisit some of our brews from last week, which were Leyline Binding, which we used to some success in both Pioneer and Modern. So before we get to all the sweet new tech, we need to do, of course, a little bit of housekeeping. We want to give a big shout out to our latest patrons. They are Sean G and Casey G. Are they related?
I don't know, but maybe.
I don't know. I don't want to know. We're all
I
gods.
don't want to know. I would rather not know and assume they are.
Yeah. That we're all God's
better.
children, one of those type of situations. So yeah, just a reminder, if you like the show, if you want to support us, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. Join at whatever level, you feel comfortable with. You get to join the Discord, which has got all kinds of crazy brews and ideas happening, especially right now, right after a new set release. You also get a bunch of other fun perks. There's a bunch of merch if you're looking to play in some of these poorly attended SEG tournaments and you want to represent the Faithless Brewing Gang. That's the way to do it.
Exactly. So thanks so much to our new patrons. Hope everybody keeps enjoying the content. And as exactly David said, it's the best way to support us and keeps us going.
Yeah, and as Morde says, after the next two episodes, it's going to be the monthly check-in with Serum Visions podcast. We are focusing on our new brewing card of the season.
By the time this comes up, voting should be on its last day. So this likely comes up Friday morning, Friday afternoon. And after that, it will come until the end of the day to propose your card. Sorry, voting will not be done. What's the name of it? When you... Come on, Morde.
Proposing new cards will be done?
Exactly.
You won't be accepting submissions, nominations. It's an honor just to be nominated.
Exactly. Nominations will be on this last day. So remember, every patron alongside a $3 tier, so Rogue Fighter tier or above, can nominate cards, but every single patron can, after the nomination is done, vote for new ones.
Yeah, so go ahead and, make your case for whichever card you would like to see us experiment with. And we will be tooling around with that card in the coming months, joined by the excellent brewers over at Serum Visions.
Exactly. Even the one and only Mana Symbol might have a tiny bit of a revival as a member of both podcasts at the same time. So we are Maybe with some luck we can even get him to join us on that episode.
From deep in the Caribbean Ocean or Caribbean seas.
Exactly. With that being said, why don't we go right ahead to our focus for today, the Dominaria United deck.
Yeah, so Dominaria United was released. We have a whole weekend worth of results. So we've seen the 5-0 drops both in Pioneer and Modern, and we've also seen challenges over the weekend in both of those formats. So what's the first thing that catches your eye, Morde, as a Modern player?
So Dan gave us this huge headliner, which I agree on, which is the biggest card for Modern was, of course, Leyline Binding. I said this on the first day. I told everyone to buy them cheap. I've bought a few of them on MTGO, and they already are I bought them at 12 ticks, and they're already up to 25. Also, sorry, tiny bit of extra housekeeping. Ignacio España changed their pledge to 3. Thank you so much. Sorry we didn't mention you, but you did it right as we were recording.
Who was that?
Ignacio España.
Okay, Ignacio España.
So he upped his pledge to 3 in order to be able to nominate a card likely. So thanks so much. Sorry we didn't mention you before. It just came up right now.
Yeah, this is a real-time adjustment being made.
Exactly.
Technology is happening all around us. All right, so Leyline Binding, you predicted this card would see a lot of play. You predicted this card would be very good. You bought in cheaply, so you put some skin in the game, as we like to say.
I think the card gives any single deck that can afford to run it or has to make tiny adjustments to run it. It's sort of forced to run it because it generates its own gameplay loop, where having binding against binding is amazing.
Yeah. You guys were talking about a bunch of different uses for it. The one use that I thought was sort of obvious that you didn't talk a lot about was all the Cascade decks. This is cheap 1-mana removal that gets rid of anything, including Cascade Hate, that, of course, has a casting cost of 3 or more. So we saw it in a bunch of those decks as well.
Yeah, your Rhinos making a bit of a resurgence, because in Rhinos, if you're splashing white, you tend to have a lot of value in going Yorion for binding, Solitude, and such. It gives you enough slots because you are using already 4-6 slots in your Cascade package, of course. So right now we have... Actually, a deck that has been using the most efficiently is Archon Creativity, because it was already a deck that was 4 or 5 colors, and having access to such a quality removal is insane.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really stands out is it's just so-so on the first couple turns. You do have to do, clunky things with your mana. But it's like that turn 3, 4, and 5 where you get to play 1 mana, literally exile whatever permanent your opponent's doing. Doesn't matter what they're playing, right? You can get rid of a Rhino, you can get rid of a Liliana, you can get rid of a Teferi, you can get rid of a whatever.
In the late game is insane.
Yeah, and then you also get to cast Counterspell or whatever. So you get these incredibly efficient turns on like 3, 4, and 5 after doing a little bit of setup, as Morde says. It's not totally free, but the cost is relatively low in the early game, and then it turns into these crazy... like swings, right? Where you're a little behind and then you end up being way ahead.
Yeah, and you have stuff, for example, one of the most common play patterns I found is, for example, I was playing in Azorius Control / Esper. Turn 1, any Triumph, like Esper Triumph, or like any on-color double Triumph, into a Temur Triumph. So, for example, turn 1 get an Esper Triumph, turn 2 get a Ketria Triumph on my body sense step, and I can already binding for 1 mana. So on turn 2, after playing a tap land, I can still play a binding.
Yeah, and I mean, that play pattern is very important because it means you get to, like, do that and, get, let's say, a turn 1 monkey. And then it just keeps getting better and better as the game goes on because you also get to, like, end of turn with 1 mana up, kill their only creature, then, tap out for Jace or Teferi or whatever else.
Exactly.
I mean, these super crazy, 2 and 3 spell turns you get to pull off in the... I guess not late game, but whatever. Late-ish game for Modern, like turn 3, 4, and 5, you start having incredible turns.
I have had a lot of scenarios where I go like against creativity, something like they go for the creativity, I go for the counterspell, they play a spell pierce, so like they turn 4, and I just go binding for the 1 mana I have behind. Like for 3 mana, I got a counterspell plus a binding. And that's insane. That's like March level of value without having to play March.
Yeah.
But because I can target anything.
So, there's a bunch of decks that have been using it. So you mentioned Creativity. We talked about all of the Cascade decks. Also, Blue-White X Control. You guys mentioned that as a home you're interested in. And then just 4-color Urion. Just plays 1 extra Triome and can play this as 1 mana. It's fine at 2 mana, though. 2 mana instant, get rid of any permanent is very playable. I don't think you even need if your opponent blows up your black land or whatever, you don't
need to have redundancy in that, because if they are blowing up, it's in the mid to late game where paying 2 mana for this is still a pretty good rate.
Yes.
So, Binding has generated in a lot of matchups a sort of mini game, as to say. I'm gonna give a tiny example of a few games I have played in the past. So now when you're playing the Modern Leagues, you're gonna face a lot of decks with a full playset of Binding. And you're gonna walk into this tiny mini game, like I was playing against Narset Days Undoing. And I had a Days Undo, and I had a Leyline Binding, and I played it on, it was game 2, I won game 1, and I played the Binding on a Teferi, right? Sorry, on an Narset. And on turn 6, they go Teferi, I try to counter, they counter back, to the Teferi resolves, bounces my Binding, they get Narset, and they activate Days Undoing. So, and then what happened in the third game is, I had the option of either killing Narset or a Chase and binding the other, and I had to binding Chase and kill Narset, because eventually when they played their own binding to get my binding, I had to make sure they were not getting an Narset at that time I couldn't play around it.
Yeah, so you're saying the permanent nature of the enchantment is a drawback. It's not Swords of Plowshares or whatever. There are cards that interact with it. And those turns end up being very tempo positive for them, especially with specifically the card Teferi, because they don't get to, you can't reflash it back in for 1 mana.
Exactly. Against any bounces or such, you can deal with it, but the problem is, so removal tends to be dead against control. The problem with Binding is it isn't dead against Binding.
Right.
So Binding is a counterspell against Binding, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah.
So Cascade decks or Creativity actually get more use out of it, because it even has a use against mid-range decks or control decks, as you get rid of one of the removal. It's a weird mini-game it generates of bindings.
And you know, it's one of those things too where, like, okay, of course Binding hits Binding, and there's a few other cards that just bounce all permanents, right? Like Petty Theft, Teferi. But because you have so few other enchantments typically, there's no reason to bring in like disenchant effects against it.
Exactly.
So it's like, oh, because it's an enchantment's a weakness. Well, you have to be playing a card that's generically good. You don't just get to play like Knight of Autumn or something in your main deck.
What I got on the first day was Tear Asunder, the new card from exactly Dominaria.
Yeah, so just a quick reminder to people who maybe haven't played with it yet. It's 1 and a green, instant, exile target enchantment or artifact, and then kicker 1 and a black. If you pay the kicker cost, you get to exile any non-land permanent. Is that correct?
I think so. I'm not sure of one part. Let me check. Okay, yeah, I thought it destroyed on its first mode. So Tear Asunder is likely one of the best disenchants, even without the kicker, because it's really weird for your 2-mana disenchant to also exile, right?
Yeah, it's just the world's best naturalized, and then it has this crazy thing where it just turns into 4 mana, kill anything.
Yeah. It goes from world's best naturalized to even having the upside of being an instant speed, I don't know, almost Vindicate.
Yeah, I wonder if they play this, if they made this card so strong as like a main deckable check to all the sagas. I don't know if they knew like Fable would be as good as it would be in Standard, let's say, but they are printing a ton of sagas, and they probably thought that at least one of them would be very good.
Yeah, I agree. But Tear Asunder, great card. I think it's gonna get a small naming here, but the most important thing is Leyline Binding was and is king of the changes in the format. Because it's borderline free, and 1 mana removal is priceless.
Yeah, and like you say, for anything, in response to Days Undoing, you can exile their Narset and just draw a full new grip. That sounds pretty good.
That's what happened in a few games, or like the fact you can get rid of a Murktide, the fact you can get with the same removal Narset, Teferi, Hammer, and I don't know. I got a Shin today. I played against, so Spike made a new brew that's Iset with a snake Dan loves. Tolarian Terror.
Oh, the 5/5 that has Ward 2 and it costs like less
with Ward 2
for every instant destruction in your graveyard. Yeah.
The Shin, the new one.
Did you call it a snake?
What is it?
It's a serpent.
It's the same.
No.
Don't get me started on this run, because I'm gonna run for half an hour because I can't cover for both Quardle and Yorion, because one is a freaking snake and one is a freaking serpent. And in other languages, there's a reason there's only one word for those. There isn't snakes and serpents, there's serpientes. They're the same, so why there's 2 names for it?
Yeah, I don't know, man. You'd have to talk to El Diablo about that one.
But yeah, I'm gonna rant about it because hounds and dogs got errata into being the same.
Yeah, hound and dog is exactly the same. That's even the same species. Sea serpent is what they're referencing with the serpent, with the Tolarian, whatever the hell it is. And a sea serpent is a made-up creature, of course, but were it to exist, it would probably be some sort of like dinosaur. Which, as we know, are much closer to modern-day birds than they are to modern-day snakes.
Oh, okay. So serpent always refers to like a worm in size, right? Like something huge.
It often does. I mean, historically, serpent obviously is a loan word from Latin for us, just like it is for you guys.
Yeah, it has the same.
So it does mean snake, but it's come to colloquially mean something else. It's a very like formal way to describe a snake. So you'd use it in this other way. Yeah,
okay, no, what I found online is like they tend to mean like something threatening, right? Like the serpent rather than snaky, rather than the snaky boy. Like Quaddle is a snake, Yorion is a serpent.
Yeah, there you go. Quaddle's a snaky boy, exactly.
Snaky boy. But yeah, outside of that rant, going back to what concerns us in Dominaria United, we have the beautiful binding in a lot of decks, 4-color, Azorius Control, Cascade, Creativity, and such, and Glimpse Elementals as well, because it's even a permanent they can find. What about Pioneer?
Well, hang on here. We have a little Cave Dan finance tip we want to shout out to everybody. So he points out that lots of lists are just adding Leyline, but many of them, especially the Cascade lists, are also playing Scion of Draco. And he wants to point out to everybody that both Scion of Draco and Svelun of Sea and Sky are both...
Is Svelun a name or a title?
I believe it's a title because it's a legendary merfolk, right? They're both for MH2 merfolk, or mythics, and they C4X play in known modern decks. They used to be dirt cheap. He has $1 to $2 here, but they're starting to creep up $2 to $4 each. So he specifically says, if you have any interest in playing Rhinos, Calibrated Blast, Domain, Merfolk, or M. Hayashi Blue, and M. Hayashi, of course, brewed up that mono blue deck that won with 4 of the Sea and Sky in there.
If there's a monocolor deck and it's not burn, there's a high % chance M. Hayashi had something to do with it.
So he's recommending to buy your playset now. So I think that is great advice. MH2 cards are only going to get more expensive. And these are MH2 mythics that are not that expensive right now, but they do something, as Dan likes to say, that is best in class. No other card does exactly what they do. And they're only going to get more expensive. So I just want to make that note. I think that's a really good note from him. We don't make a lot of finance calls, but I think I've made like 2 or 3, and they've all been pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I have only done one, I think, which was the binding one, because I really try to not do anything I'm not sure of regarding other people's money. But binding was just a slam dunk. Also, fun fact, Svelun got referred to in the High Tide Fallen Empires.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So, like, it seems like Svelun was a long time card, like, concept, as the Merfolk card.
Yeah, I don't know if when they were making those sets, they realized that they'd be making them so much in the future that they could just start using random references in the flavor text to think of new titles, but...
You reach a point where you just go back to a set, to an old plane, and you're like, okay, what do we name from here?
Yeah.
And you just start to rely on whatever you can get your hands on. Wait, High Tide said, may Svelun and her tides favor you. That's it!
Yes.
And then you have, like, the Asmo.
Yeah, so Pioneer, I mean, we haven't seen that much new stuff in there. Of course, Liliana of the Veil was the big ad, and it didn't spawn any new decks. It just sort of slotted into a bunch of existing decks. So Rakdos midrange, already trying to play a very low resource game, already playing a shit ton of 3-mana rares and mythic rares. Liliana slots right in there. Multiple Greasefang lists, want to put stuff in the graveyard, want to, punish your opponent if they're trying to save up all their removal for Abzan and Greasefang, or for specifically the Greasefang. So you can play it in Abzan or Mardu, etc. And then there's just a bunch of random, sort of mid-range black decks. I think mid-range is a good place to be. I think now we know when new sets come out, people want to play with new cards, and they love to, make these futzy decks. And so you should just play aggro to punish them. But if you want to beat the aggro decks, you should just play a bunch of, like, monoremoval.com decks, and Liliana slots very well into there. If you just go, like, push into Dreadbore, into Liliana, right? And then now you're just up a Planeswalker, and you've probably traded relatively even on mana the first 3 turns of the game. You're in a pretty good spot.
So what I saw, I was testing some Pioneer the last couple of days with the Yorion Orso deck, and Absent Greasefang, I saw like a lot of Absent Greasefang, with all of them playing 4 lilies.
Yeah, I think some people are playing 3, some people are playing 4. I mean, people love this love this Greasefang list. Greasefang it sucks. I've just been smoking it with every garbage list I come up with. So keep doing that, everybody. But yeah, it just makes a lot of sense there. Like, a lot of times you don't want to play out your Greasefang into removal. Liliana makes your opponent react, right? You have a Planeswalker that's slowly making its way to ultimate. And while it's doing that, it's putting various cards in the graveyard. It's also really good in the mirror, because one of the best ways to fight Greasefang was to just, they discard their vehicle. You play Graveyard Trespasser, exile it. Now they have to spend like a card plus discard a card to get rid of it. Liliana's actually really good against Graveyard Trespasser specifically.
Okay.
It's one of the few cards that like gets rid of it without, assuming it's the only creature in play, of course. But so it's weirdly like Graveyard Trespasser is now really bad in the mirror of all these matchups, but it's still really good against Phoenix. So I think it creates kind of a weird, like paper, rock, scissors kind of thing where, do I want to play for Graveyard Trespasser's main? It makes me really bad against the other mid-range lists that are playing for Liliana, but makes me better against the non-Liliana decks, so that's kind of interesting to me.
Okay. I like the rock, paper, scissors it generates, like this weird... Liliana is good against the Trespasser is good, and Phoenix just dunks on Lily.
Yeah,
and makes you cry.
It's really embarrassing how bad Liliana is to... It's like, plus Liliana, okay, discard Phoenix. My turn.
So, the other day, we had this surreal experience in an LGS group here, where one of the guys made top 8. And after that, he started discussing the plays he made during the tournament. I have never wanted to stop playing Magic so much after hearing the plays this guy had made in order to win. He actually kept the 4 Lilianas against Rage and actually managed to win by placing Liliana against Rage. And, for example, set it in Void Mirror against Rage, where it has 0 text because he thought it stopped, like, creeping chills, and it was like, why does Magic do this? Why is Magic like this, good sir? So it just destroyed me emotionally.
Yeah, those are tough to come back from.
And what about Binding in Pioneer? Have you seen any so far?
Well, of course, we brewed some lists up. We have seen it played in Enigmatic Incarnation, but it's fine there, I think. They're playing the full 4. They do have 4 Enigmatic Incarnations. They have been adding some 7-drops. The list I have here has 1 Coma, 2 Colossal Sky Turtle, 1 Titan of Industry, and then Agent of Treachery and Titan of Industry in the sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's sort of like a relatively easy thing to do. These lists also just end up making the game go long, so these 7-drops don't get stuck in your hand. And the Colossal Sky Turtle especially... the bounce ability is actually quite good against Greasefang. It's the return target card from your graveyard your hand is actually quite good against control, right? They counter your first Enigmatic Incarnation, you pick it up and try again.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's a pretty low-cost way to play the card. Playing a Coma is actually nice in Game 1 against control because you just have this uncounterable threat, right, in the late game eventually.
And games go really long with Enigmatic, so...
Yeah, really long.
That's the thing with Enigmatic. Running the 7-drops is not as devastating because the chances of hard casting them are actually non-zero. When I was playing it in Modern, I actually got to hard cast Agent of Treachery a few number of times.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, Chain of the Rocks, in theory, is great removal, but actually just sucks. Like, the way the mana works, you can basically never chain on turn 1 ever. And even chaining on 2 is really hard, right? You have to have enough white sources to have a white by turn 2. And you have to have specifically a mountain, not a red source. So it was already like a turn 3 or 4 play that was just very efficient. Well, Leyline Binding, if you're going to play all these Triomes and Fortnightliest Presence, is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Only it's Flash, and so it has much more application specifically, again, against Greasefang. Flash removal is so much better. And it's better against Phoenix and stuff like that. So I think it also just had a very natural place. Like, you didn't want to get rid of your Chain of the Rocks because you don't have that many good 2s. You don't have any good 2s. You have a couple 2s, but they aren't good.
Yeah. Change Your Rocks is just decent, while Binding is just Binding is just an upgrade, even if it wasn't for the 7-drop play.
Yeah.
Like, just as a removal is an upgrade.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you can fill out your deck with whatever you want, and however many 7s you want to play. I mean, I think the Colossal Sky Turtles especially are very free. They are enchantments.
Yeah, I think 4 7-drops is insanity, but yeah, I think it's insanity.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell too. Like, I don't want to discount anyone's 5-0s in week 1, but like, you're playing against all kinds of weirdo decks where people are still trying to figure it out. You can get a lot of really good matchups. I think if you just build your deck to beat aggro decks right now, you're going to just do really well. You, again, just like load up on removal. This player has just got a ton of removal. Almost all their 3-drops are functionally removal. Yeah, so I think Leyline Binding is just part of that. It's like a removal spell that's cheap, so you want to be playing a ton of removal, and then also gives you this like almost unbeatable late game. We'll say not totally unbeatable late game, but it gives you a sense of inevitability where you get your Leyline of Binding, you sack your 6-drop, you get your 7-drop, and then the big thing that I found when I was playing is you just play your one of Glasspool Mimic. So your random Omen of the Sea or whatever turns into your second Titan or your second Sky Turtle or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if you're playing a lot of removal, make sure a lot of them is instant speed, or you can attack graveyards just so you don't get Greasefang to death.
Yeah, Greasefang is everywhere, and, you know, it's very easy to play around. You just have to play around it. You have to, you know, the format is quite forgiving if you pay the piper, and the piper is asking you for a very specific thing.
Yeah, the piper is specific, but he's cheap. Just specific.
Yes.
So that's something that I have really taken into consideration when I'm playing Pioneer, because it's shockingly hard to find removals that actually kill Greasefang, right? Like, Revolt is not as easy as one would seem. Stuff like March is too slow. Strangle is a sorcery, so you just struggle to always find the correct card.
Yeah, the thing that I've found is it's really hard to find a removal that is good against both Llanowar Elf on turn 1 and Greasefang. And those are the cards that are kind of pressuring your removal.
Exactly.
So you want stuff that's good against Llanowar Elf, or if you want to think of it that way, like mono red, but not really. But it's really important to kill Elf on turn 1. And then it's also really important to kill Greasefang with an instant speed spell. And the cards that do that are very, very rare, right? Like, the 2-mana spells that kill Greasefang are only good if you're on the play against mono green, but as you say, all the 1-mana spells, except for specifically the red Shock that does 3 with Spell Mastery, is a card I think is really good right now in the format. Kills Elf on 1, and then by the time Greasefang comes down, in theory, you should have, you know, enough instants in your, or sorceries in your graveyard to kill Greasefang, so.
Yeah.
But Binding is a card, it won't kill Elf. So that puts you behind the 8 ball, but it is so mana efficient in the middle game, it can take out their Planeswalker and let you leave up counterspell for the next Planeswalker, or their 6-mana sorcery or whatever, or let you play a Planeswalker or something. So it isn't good against specifically turn 1 Elf, but it is very good at the catch-up phase of the game.
Yeah, I agree. But mono green seems like a bit of less of a trouble when everybody's trying new stuff, but I fear once the meta settles, the king is just gonna return.
So yeah, other cool lists. A couple people 5-0'd with the new, what do you call it, Urza at Home?
Urza at Home, Pioneer Urza, or
Pioneer
just
Urza.
paradoxical stuff.
So yeah, it's Meria, Scholar of Antiquity. This is a card we recognize as super powerful. We said it would probably form an engine with Kinnan and Emery, and it did.
And it did exactly that.
We said it would go, you know, you'd probably want to go infinite with Paradox Engine. We said you'd probably want to play 3 in your main deck and 4 Karns in your main deck and 1 in your sideboard. The 2 lists that 5-0'd did exactly that. So yeah, I don't want to take anything away from both of these brewers, but this is sort of the kind of thing that I think we expected to see. I think we'll see people experiment with this a lot. People love these types of shells. All I know is, like, Emery decks suck in Pioneer. Emery is such a bad card. And I wonder if just people aren't used to playing against it, or you got the right matchups or whatever. But, like, man, these decks look so fragile. Like, any amount of disruption plus a little bit of aggression, and they can't ever win.
These decks flop to literally 6 removal spells. Like, as you have no counter spell or anything, if your opponent has literally 6 removal spells on their deck, or they actually manage to draw more removals than you draw Emerys,
yeah,
you might be close to death immediately. So I think these decks get a huge upper step by the opponent misses the correct line via lack of knowledge. Like I have seen a lot of comments with Iset Breach winning a lot in Modern, and every single comment and every single post Rose Hannets or Cory Bomister make after their win, they have another one of their mates or the players they play with saying, "Did he win or did your opponent lose the game?"
Yeah.
And I think that we have the same thought here.
So it'll be interesting to see, like, again, I don't know how much, obviously these lists are different, so there's obviously wiggle room on how to build it, but your sideboard's pretty locked in place because you are playing Karn.
Yes.
And you can't change your main deck too much because you do need a real density of artifacts, both for Emery and Meria, and you're locked into the 12 Legends and the 4 Mox Ambers, and at least 4 Springleaf Drums, some number of Moonsnare prototypes, and then it looks like 4 Courier's Briefing for everybody. So a lot of these choices are actually kind of locked. There's not that many variables. So, like, how resistant is this going to be against hate? How resistant is this going to be against opponents' Karns and, removal deck? So, cool stuff. Obviously, Meria is a super cool card. It's kind of doing exactly what we thought, right? As soon as you see Meria, you're like, all right, with Paradox Engine, this card is super busted. People are making decks that are trying to play it with Meria, Paradox Engine and a bunch of mana. And, we'll have to see it. We'll have to see what their longevity is going to look like.
Yeah. Also, there was a 5-0 with Meria in Modern, shockingly, in a Hard and Scales list.
Yeah, this is a crazy list. So, Meria is a 3-mana 3/3. She's not nothing, but she's not. I did not think of her as a card in a beatdown list. I mean, Hardened Scales is somewhat combo-y, but it's also like just an aggro deck, right? Sometimes you're just kind of all in on like a 8/8 Ravager for a couple of attacks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of artifacts lying around, and she can generate a bunch of mana, but man, I was really surprised to see this list. Really interesting.
So I don't think she's here for the mana, actually. I think she's here for the second mode, because with Hard Scales, a lot of the time, you get stuck behind with one Savas, one Archon Worker, maybe one Automaton and a Welding Shard. Or, one Osolith, one Welding Shard, a Worker, and, I don't know, an Animation Module or something like that. And that means you're drawing 3 cards per turn with Meria.
Yeah.
I think that's the mode she's here for, because Osolith is just staying around doing nothing, never taps. Same with Welding Shard. The fact they don't require to tap down means you can just use them completely. Like, 1 Osolith plus 1 Welding Shard with Meria is 1 extra card per turn for 0 downside.
Yeah, so I mean, you can even turn your Moth Nexus into a creature and tap to start looking. Yeah,
and tap for Meria. Yeah, so I think that's why we have it here for. If I had to guess, like, the value lines you can go for it have to be pretty impressive. And these don't diminish post side, like bringing in Grafdigger's Cage and Chalice of the Void and start tapping them for value.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder, I mean, it's probably only going to get played with Paradox Engine, but it makes me wonder if we could play it like in a more fair shell in Pioneer. I
mean, maybe. The lack of a good already aggressive shell, like Hard Scales is not amazing in Modern, but has legs, Like,
yeah.
If I lose to Hard Scales, I wouldn't shock me to the ground. So, at least you're ready for that. Maybe that's what needed.
But yeah, super cool tech. I think, obviously this card does something very unique. It does it in a different color pair that we've seen, so I think this is a card we'll continue to see people experiment with. Again, I don't want to seem like I'm negative. In Pioneer, the lists are already kind of converging, it seems like. I mean, a lot of these card choices are kind of locked in, and it'll just be like, is this rough shell good enough to withstand people learning how to play against it, and maybe even like playing a sideboard card or 2 against it. We'll have to find out. But in Modern, I mean, yeah, it's like, seems like the sky's the limit. There's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do.
Exactly. So I hope Meria seems some play, because she is extremely interesting as a card. Ursa at home is still Ursa.
Sure.
And then below that we have, at least with a card our Discord described as Bone Crusher with artifacts.
Yeah, so this is it Yotia or Yoshia?
I'm just gonna say Shotia or Yotia.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with Yotia.
Sure. Declares War. So this card showed up specifically in one pilot's hands, which is Killer Sheep. And they played it with 4 Hex Parasite and 4 Power Conduit and 4 Urza Saga, 4 Fabled Mirror Breaker, and then an Elder Dragon War. So the trick here, the joke here, is that Power Conduit lets you re-trigger the whatever mode you want over and over again. So if you want each turn Yotia to let you turn one of your artifacts into a 4/4, it can do that. It'll just make a 4/4 artifact over and over again for the rest of the game.
I would have to guess the most common mods, because you're also using Power Conduit, which means you're putting a counter on something, which people tend to forget with... Like, taking the charge counter is the cost for it. You still get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, so with Yotia, you're making a 1/3 Thopter every turn.
Yeah.
Like, that's the low ground.
Yeah, and okay, that doesn't sound very good, but I mean, I think the real key is that Power Conduit plus Urza's Saga is awesome, because in response to the third trigger, you get a free 1 or 0 drop over and over again, and then you get to make you can continue to make your constructs.
Yeah, even keeping just the Saga as a land and getting a free Mishra's Bubble or Spellbomb or whatever for free every turn is bound to get you so much value.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if no one else tried it, but the list is just super cool. Yotia just doesn't seem that powerful to me in Modern, so even with all these tricks, I'm wondering, is this the card? I have tried Power Conduit with the other red drop, where the first Saga thing makes you discard your hand, but the second Saga trigger lets you draw 2 cards. And Power Conduit with that is awesome. Like, of course, you have to... There's no read ahead, so you have to do the discard your hand. But if you're playing all cheap spells like this deck is... But then for the rest of the game, Power Conduit just reads tap, draw 2 cards, which is just totally insane.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. I mean, there's tons of artifacts here, and maybe just over and over again they get to tap all these artifacts to do some damage to their opponent's creatures. You are getting free artifacts from your Fable token. You also have Girapir Ethergrid, which is another source of damage. So I think you just have a lot of ways to control the board, and then you kind of have this inevitability baked in with Power Conduit, just generating a dragon every turn. Or
the deck 100% relies on A, opponent not being able to respond to Ragavan and just win via Ragavan being Ragavan, which has to be a fair amount of wins, or making sure Hex Parasite / Power Conduit makes it alive. Like, making sure you have one of those on the board seems extremely relevant at getting to do whatever you want.
Yeah, so like a card like Blood Moon, this deck can't interact with at all, and obviously kills all your Urza Sagas, and so...
Shockingly that the mono red deck could be really vulnerable to Blood Moon.
I agree, but it seems like it is. It does not have a lot of ways to win the game.
Also, the deck is playing 2 Leyline of Sanctity on the sideboard, which is weird. Like, only 2 Leylines, and no way to cast them in the main deck outside of drawing your Canopy lands.
Yeah, you have 2 Sunbay Canyon. They have 1 Blood Crypt to fetch for. There's no black source in the entire list. It's not even a red-white land for some reason. Oh, it's black for the Hex Parasite, I see.
Yeah, no, they have 1 black land for Hex Parasite because that, if you're using that for 4 or 5 turns, it's gonna drain you really fast. Yeah. Also, one of the versions has 1 Inscribed Tablet, which is a card also so Modern play as a 3-off in Eldrazi. Inscribed Tablet is 1 mana artifact, pay 1 and sacrifice, reveal the top 5, put a land from among them into your hand, and if you don't hit a land, you get to draw a card.
Yeah, Ari Lax actually picked it as what he thought would be the best card in Modern from the entire set. So
wait, really?
I was surprised to see. I mean, he had that right over Leyline Binding, specifically because he thought of how it would interact with Tron. And here we are in week 1, and people are using it in Eldrazi Tron.
Yeah, E-Tron I can see it because this is like Sylvan's crying if it had a lot of identity issues and just, I don't know, was super dumb. But in Eldrazi Tron, however, I can see it as a few off.
And, you know, people love playing Eldrazi Tron. It's kind of fallen off the map in the MH2 world. So any card that, you know, gives people the excuse to maybe try it again. Again, it is the early days of a format. We've seen that aggro decks tend to overperform early on. This is a deck that is disruptive enough while providing, you know, especially if you draw your Eldrazi Temples, a pretty quick clock. So it might be that this doesn't have legs.
Prison Tron is seeing a lot of play right now. It even won a huge tournament the past couple of days, which is like, what if E-Tron met Blue Tron and it met Mono Green Tron and it just tries to do crazy stuff? It's a super interesting deck.
So when you say Prison Tron, you're just referring to Chalice of the Void, right?
No. It's like Prison-ish. Like Spellskite, Welding Shard, Calice, Snaring Reach. I'm not saying Lantern Control number prison, but prison-ish. Like Calice, Spellskite, Snaring Reach in the main deck alongside Karns. It even plays one of the bad Karn.
What's the bad Karn?
Not the terrible Karn, the mediocre Karn. What's the mediocre Karn? The silver Karn.
Oh, the one that actually makes Karnstructs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The list I'm looking at that went 3-1 in the Modern Prelim does not have the mediocre Karn.
Okay, no, but let me try to find a list. I think maybe that's not like full on prison. It's like more Eldrazi Throne with Calice. No, see, it has Welling Shard, 3 Snaring Reach, 4 Mystic Force, 3 Serum Powders, Pithing Needle. If a deck plays 4 Spellskite, I call it prison.
Okay. That's
and not even get me started if it has a Possessed Portal in the sideboard.
So what about when decks were playing like Spellskite and what's the one where they copied the 2/1 flyer over and over again?
Wait, what?
Splinter Twin played Spellskite, so was that prison?
Shh, don't go via that argument. But like, this is the tournament I was forced by Zach to talk about. SCG Con Columbus was won by Prison Throne, which played 4 Spellskite, 4 Calice, 4 Expedition Map, Relic, Sorcerer's Spyglass, Serum Powder, Mystic Force, Snaring Breach. I think by this time the card hadn't released, but the new versions are actually playing some number of tablets.
Yeah, so I think that might be a mainstay. It is a colorless card. It lets you do stuff. It also just cycles, right? It's not the end of the world when it doesn't find a land, or in the late game when you don't want land anymore.
No, it's not a May.
Oh, okay.
No. If it was a May, I would like the card. It's a reveal 5, put a land card from among them. If you don't hit a land, you get to draw.
Got it.
No, if it was a May, I would actually like the card a lot more. The fact in the late game it's still a land, it's super annoying unless you have Ursa Saga. So all of the decks that play this have to play Ursa Saga.
Right. Well, I mean, that's something.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so a card that I was really surprised to see play in both Modern and Pioneer is Serra Paragon. So just a reminder, this is 2 white for a 3/4 angel flying. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. So it sort of has like a Sun Titan-ish, grinding inevitability about it. Seemed very slow and clunky to me. It seems like the card that you play on turn 5, play a fetch land, and it eats a Fatal Push.
Yeah,
all
but
the time.
I mean, if I'm getting a Fatal Push plus 2 life final land out of my opponent, I don't feel that bad, right?
I feel terrible to do that on turn 5. I think you just lose all those games.
The thing is, you might be in trouble in those games, but the games it survives, it's like a super Lurrus.
Yeah, but Lurrus is not a card that saw play in main decks ever, so comparisons to cards that only exist in a magical, made-up sideboard for one reason or another is not relevant to me.
I think Lurrus decks never saw play main deck, because Lurrus was a companion.
Yeah, but some decks didn't meet the Lurrus condition, and Lurrus never made the main deck of those decks.
Yeah, but I think that's because if your deck was able to meet the Lurrus condition, it means Lurrus was good. So it's sort of like nullified itself, because if your deck was close to meeting the Lurrus condition, it means Lurrus was good in your deck, but why play Lurrus in your deck when you can play Lurrus as a companion? Like, it sort of de-evolved itself into forcing itself as a companion, because why would I play Lurrus in the main deck when I can play it as a companion? And if I don't want Lurrus, why would I play it as a companion? So why would you play it in the main deck? Besides Enigmatic, which was super far away from accomplishing, playing the requirement, any deck that wanted to play Lurrus in the main deck would just run it as a companion. I think Lurrus would have seen a decent amount of main deck play if they banned the companion rule, for example.
Well, I mean, this is the maybe the proof concept of that. There's 4 Serra Paragons in a Jeskai Stoneblade list.
Yes.
Which is absolutely wild. So 4 Oswald Fiddle... So first of all, it's Urian.
Of course.
4 Oswald Fiddlebender, 4 Stoneforge Mystic, a bunch of random equipment, of course. It has the Lightning Greaves, Crackdown Construct combo. It has Sword of the Meek Thopter combo. It has the Crucible of Worlds Urza's Saga thing happening. It has Goblin Engineer, and then it has Serra Paragon at the top end of all this stuff, with no mana ramp whatsoever.
No. So I think what this deck is trying to do is overwhelm you with plans. Turn 1, Ragavan, into turn 2, Goblin Engineer, get a Sword, into turn 3, Stoneforge Mystic, get a Kaldra, into turn 4, Oswald, if you can't solve it, I'm gonna Oswald, into turn 5, Serra Paragon, get back my Ragavan, and just every turn turning something that's kill on sight, right? Esper Sentinel, kill on sight, Ragavan, kill on sight, Golden Engineer, kill on sight, Oswald and Stoneforge, kill on sight, Serra Paragon, we just said it. And every single turn just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, so I find Urian interesting here. So obviously, Urian lets you play a bunch of one-ofs, and you don't have to have any discipline at all, making your tags have a zillion one-ofs. That's awesome.
Yes.
But you get almost no value. There's almost nothing that Urian blinks here that actually draws a card. It's just Stoneforge Mystic, right?
No, but there's hidden value. You have Nettles's Kaldra and Battle School.
Okay.
Which are, of course, ETBs. Because the token dies, but you get the token back. That's extremely common.
All right, so you have 3 cards plus 4 Stoneforge Mystics.
Then you have the 4 Stoneforge Mystics. Then you have the slight value in Portable Hole because it's pretty common to move it around.
Okay.
No, I mean, that happens. A lot of the time you will use Portable Hole on like a Ragavan on turn 1, and eventually it's going to be relevant because you're going to have a Urion. And then you have Breya's Apprentice and the 4 Goblin Engineer. It's not a lot of value, but I don't think it's negligible.
Yeah, I feel like Urian is more here, so you get to play all of your sweet one-ofs, honestly. Like,
yeah.
You're one of everything.
I think that might be consistent enough due to having 8 tutors, right? 4 Golden Engineer, 4 Oswald. Means you really have 8 ways to look for anything.
Well, and Stoneforge Mystic is also a tutor.
Yeah, but I mean, not for the... Like, for example, if I want to get... Let's say I want to get Lightning Grips. Sorry, Lightning Grips, I have 12 of them. But if I want to go get the one of Thopter Foundry, I have 4 Oswald, 4 Goblin Engineer.
Yeah.
Super sketchy, 4 Teferi Time Raveler in the sideboard. And 1 License Curse, which I'm shocked it doesn't see playing in the main deck. Getting a License Curse turn 1 via Oswald or Goblin Engineer has to be devastating for a million decks.
Yeah, I mean, the graveyard hit they're choosing to play instead is Soul Guide Lantern as a card that's easily tutorable with their Oswald and Engineer, and then Lion Sash is tutorable with all 12 because Stoneforge Mystic can tutor for it instead.
I'm shocked to see 0/0 drops in the main deck. Like, I think if I would play this, I would take out maybe the Embercleave, the Halo Fountain, and maybe... I don't know what else. I would take out 2 or 3 cards, maybe the Rabbit Battery, and go for 3-4 Mishra's Bubbles, both for the Serra Paragon value, the Goblin Engineer value, and the fact you can Oswald them for a 1-drop.
Yeah, I also like the 1-mana artifact that when it goes to your graveyard, you get to draw. I think that card's really good with...
1 mana?
Tron plays it. You can sack it for a mana to make a mana of any color.
Oh, Chromatic Star.
Yeah. But it's really good with Oswald, and I think cheap cards you can bring back with your Serra Paragon for some amount of value are really important.
Yeah. Also, the 2-mana egg, it's not an egg, Igor Wellspring, I think, has to see play in your Golden Engineer deck.
Yeah, not a lot of 2s to tutor up here. There's only Greaves, Sword of the Meek, Thopter Foundry, and Lion Sash.
I mean, when you go for the 2s, you likely go for the combo. That's what I see here, right?
Yeah, I mean, this deck is the most all-in on combo I've ever seen of any deck that's intentionally making their deck not very combo dense.
The thing is, I think you go for the combo once your opponent is overwhelmed, right? Like, Ragavan into Engineer, into Oswald, into Stoneforge. Eventually, if one of them sticks, you just go for the combo. But you have to threaten enough. Like, the reason Thopter Foundry doesn't seem more playing Modern right now is because it's so easily dealable if it's the only thing you're doing. However, this deck is trying to, like, overwhelm its opponent with different stuff, and eventually just, oh, okay, Foundry Sword?
Yeah, interesting. They're playing no Ingenious Smith either, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice. That's a card we've seen. Like Aspiring Spike had a mono white version of a list like this, I think, that played 4 Smith, and they seemed very good in that shell. I'm not saying it's wrong to not do so. It's just a surprising thing to note.
I agree.
Like you say, there's so many one-ofs. There's obviously we're picking out some cards we like, some cards we don't like. I'm not sure that like you need a Rabbit Battery. You know, that's already like raising an eyebrow for me. Do you need all 4 Serra Paragons? You know, is it often better than Ingenious Smith? I need to see some data on that. I'm not sure I'm a believer.
So I think the best build to build this deck would be adding some number of Mishra's Bubble, maybe trim a Serra Paragon. Take some of the one-offs that with some testing. Whenever you test with these couple of decks, you tend to eventually realize which cards were not supposed to be there, right?
Yeah, although if they 5-0'd, maybe they're like, oh no, they went 6-1 and almost won the Modern Challenge, so maybe they're like every card is, you know, in its perfect place.
I love that they also have the Crackdown Construct combo with Lightning Grips.
Yeah. Yeah, they got it all. They're not willing to skimp on anything. And we saw Serra Paragon in a bunch of other decks. So it was again in Modern in a Urian list in like a mono white Sun Titan. And with their Sun Titan, there's the Meria, the Sky Ruin. And then in Pioneer, it was in a bunch of removal dot decks. You can pair it with just black. You can pair it with black and red if you want. Those lists are all basically just red-black mid-range with a few other cards. Specifically, Vanishing Verse is maybe the best removal spell in the format other than Push. So the rest of the white cards aren't very good. And you can see people just trying random shit. And you're making your mana a lot worse. But maybe it's worth it, right? So...
yeah, just... being able to both be having the Vanishing Verse is almost always worth it just due to exiling Parhelion and Liliana in the new format. Also, I love that Serra Paragon is the first card that got Bob to stop playing 4 Sun Titan. Because they consider this a worthy replacement of one of them at least. So, it has done its work in Modern.
Yeah.
Getting back Ranger Captain of Field seems super annoying.
Right, but I mean, you have to play a 4-drop and has to live. I mean, I think if that happens, you should get a Ranger Captain back. That seems reasonable to me. For 3 mana, you don't even get it for free. You have to cast it.
The most annoying one has to be Teferi, right? Keep casting Teferi.
Yes.
Deal with this.
So that was a card that some people had pegged very high. I think Saffron Olive had it like 2 on his Pioneer list. I sort of guffawed at that. I thought that was ridiculous, but it's seeing a lot more play than I would have thought. So maybe I need to check myself before I riggedy wreck myself.
Get riggedy wrecked. So besides, what's our next card? I think we're going straight into a card we got super Evolved Sleeper. I think I had at least a lot of faith for it. In Pioneer, of course.
Yeah, I actually played against this week a couple times. I beat the deck both times, but it looked good. I mean, it just provides you inevitability, right? When you're beating down, it's not bad. Getting that death touch counter actually matters if you're trying to block.
Oh yeah,
they came up a lot. Like we block with your Omnath or whatever just to not die, and it trades up. And yeah, just mono black just has a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's the same deck we've known for a while. 4 push, 4 Thoughtseize, always like a 2 of. Slightly more universal removal that costs 2 mana, and then just a bunch of 1 and 2 drops. And Evolved Sleeper just I think is a little better than some of the other 1 drops people were playing, and it just seems to be doing just enough. Maybe that list was a little closer than people thought. Maybe just encourage people to try, and it would have been better. I have seen a lot of people playing Sheoldred, your favorite card, in Pioneer. I'm stunned. This card just does not seem very good to me.
I mean, I have seen a lot of people saying it's amazing and super annoying, and it's pretty good in like the mono black devotion deck list, but I still don't love the card. The fact if your opponent just kills it, it does literally a 4-drop that if it dies, regardless of when you top deck it, it just does nothing, scares me. Like we were talking about how Serra Paragon had to survive to do something. At least if you top deck it on like turn 7, it doesn't have to survive, right?
Right.
Sheoldred always has to like make a full turn for it to do something like Drain 2 life.
But even Drain 2 life is not playable, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know why people love it.
The Rhino drains 3 when it comes into play and is not playable. Sees no play.
Exactly.
Now this is easier to cast. It is Death Touch instead of Trample. I think in shells that care about the Sheoldred ability, maybe Death Touch is better because you're trying to not die. You're not an aggressive deck. But man, I'm just so shocked. Like, Are you saying like a 4-mana 4/5 that, let's just say it does 2 damage when it comes into play? That's basically what it does. It just seems so bad to me. Like, who cares if you gain 2 life? That's nothing. That's basically like flavor text.
It is. But I don't know, people like it, and I can't disagree with everyone, just with most. But
yes, strange to see play. Hopefully it becomes a mainstay so we can taunt Morde at all times.
I never said the card was bad. Okay, I said it was.
You said it sucks, actually, I think is what your quote was.
I said design sucks. I'm gonna stick by it. It lacks fun text.
Yeah, so then the other cards we want to highlight are the Lords. So we saw Rundvelt Hordemaster show up in the Saturday Modern Challenge. Goblins won it.
Oh, yeah.
It just replaced a few other goblins. There's no other new tech. It opens up a bunch of combo options. It helps the deck reload against... We know what all the hate cards are. For the tribal decks, it helps reload against Wrath of God. It helps reload against, whatever pitch elemental. It helps you actually combo in certain situations with Snoop. It does everything. So, super cool card. I played against it in Pioneer and lost to it badly. I guess not that much to say about it, or is there anything else you wanted to expound on? But yeah, just a really cool card.
So in the last episode I talked about how you have to make sure to sacrifice it before you find a sling gang, right? So you don't kill yourself. So you just don't if you sacrifice your first Snoop and you have the Lord in play, you're gonna move that Snoop, right? Because you're gonna exile something new, so the sling gang is gonna leave the top of your deck. However, what you can do is, assuming your opponent kill your 2 and your... What's the one that 2-drop to the top?
I don't remember.
Okay, the Heartbringer. If your opponent kills the Heartbringer, or you just luckily found Kiki Shiki on the top of your deck, you don't actually have to look for the Heartbringer. You can actually just win the game. Just make 40 copies of Snoop equal to your deck. On the end step, let them die, and before they die, make a new infinite amount so they're last up in your opponent's end step. And when they start dying, they're gonna start exiling cards from the top of your deck until you have Sling and Lieutenant on top of your deck. And then you can win.
Yeah, I actually think you want to make them all right away. You just want to make infinite the first time. And then you let the triggers go one at a time.
Yeah, they start dying one at a time, right? They don't die all at the same time.
So yeah, you already want the infinite ones in play, and then once they're in play, then you sack them all. Yeah,
you just have to make sure, if your opponent maybe has a way to survive, just make sure you don't exile your whole deck if possible.
Yeah, so I mean, basically what you want is, let's say you want 100 in play, you'll sack some number of them until you get to your Sling Gang. Let's say it takes 35 of them. You've got 65 left. And then each of those sacks to drain your opponent for 1. And you don't have to exile anymore because they're doming your opponent.
So yeah. Besides that, the other lore that saw a lot of play was the one I didn't expect to, which was the elf one just being amazing in Pioneer.
Yeah, really surprised. We liked it maybe for Modern, of course, always adjusting for the fact that Modern is can be very hateful to tribal decks, but a lot of people had success. Some people were playing the full boat of Shaman of the Pack, which is kind of what we had seen before. Some people are not doing that. There's people playing with Nykthos, which is super cool. Yeah, they're playing the Circle of Dreams Druid. Very, very interesting list. I'm looking at one right here that has 2 Sylvan Messengers in it, which is a card I didn't even know was Pioneer legal.
What's the... Oh, yeah. When was it printed?
Probably when we returned to Zendikar or some random shit. I don't know. It's one of those cards that just got seeded. There probably weren't enough elves at the time, so just no one ever thought about it, but this person was aware of it.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, it's just like a straight up value deck, right? You have Mana Elf, you have Jasper Sentinel, and then you have all your powerful 2-drops, including Leaf Crown Visionary, which I think is the best of them all. And then you have a bunch of your 3-drops, Steel Leaf Champions, just a beater card, and then eventually you try to collect Dead Company and a Shaman of the Pack and just do the last bits of damage.
I really hate losing to when you have the board stabilized, you're borderline trying to win against elves, and all of a sudden Collected Company double Shaman of the Pact. Screw you. Hit you for 16.
The other thing worth noting is Shaman of the Pack just makes the elf deck a little bit more transformative. You look at these sideboards and the vast majority of the cards are black.
Yeah.
Which means they get to interact with other creature decks in a way that other tribal decks can't, and they get to attack the graveyard because they get to play Leyline of the Void. And with Mana Elf, you can, let's say you draw it on turn 1, which is always the worst thing for Leyline, you can turn 3 Leyline of the Void, which is actually fine against Phoenix. Or if you're on the play against Greasefang, they really struggle to beat that.
Okay. Also surprised by the addition of 4 Steel Leaf Champion.
Well, I just think it's much more of a beatdown deck, right? Like you play Steel Leaf Champion on 2, and then I play like Leaf Crown Visionary, attack you with a 6-power creature. Can you really now kill my Lord? It seems like you have to kill my
5/4 hard to block creature that you can chump.
Well, and now it's 6/5 with my Visionary that you can't chump.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like, oh man, I have to kill it. Now I'm left with my like Lord/Engine. So.
But yeah, super interesting. I don't think any of us saw it coming.
I 100% didn't. I thought it'd be fine, and I've played against Elves decks that they all seem fine, but I was really surprised that it seems like it saw more success in Pioneer than it did in Modern, which was a surprise to me.
Yeah. Finally, I think we have Bordalian Hexcatcher doing what we assume, being the best Merfolk printer besides Sibelune, and Merfolk's team being terrible. Temporary Lockdown seeing a lot of sideboard play because it's a great card but super specific.
Yeah, I mean, and then we, of course, saw Llanowar Loam Speaker in multiple Jeskai Ascendancy lists. I said that we would.
Yeah.
Dan didn't believe me. I think there were multiple 5/0 lists in week 1 with multiple Llanowar Loam Speakers in it. The card's just insane with Ascendancy, so... Yeah, super, super cool week for week 1. There was a bunch of cards that we expected, right? We thought Enigmatic or Leyline Binding would be good. We thought a few of these other cards would find homes, and they did. And then other cards really surprised us with how powerful they were. At least in week 1, we're seeing a bunch of cool lists, so really encouraging.
Exactly. The only card I think I'm gonna cheer on making it bigger is Serra Paragon. I love that card. I'm gonna make my best to make it see more play.
Yeah, I like the card. I just don't believe in it.
I love that Dan said you shut him down immediately because he referred to it as a white wireless tracker, and it was like, Dan, that's your mistake. You cannot tell David it's a wireless tracker. He's gonna shut you down. You're gonna get shut down. You have to tell him.
He put, we don't need to discuss it on the freaking thing. I was like, all right, then I'm not going to spend any more time analyzing it.
I'm just gonna say.
Tyler's tracker is totally unplayable.
You have to sell it as a Lurrus, not a wireless tracker. Wireless tracker is unplayable. Lurrus, maybe not.
Yeah.
So yeah, super amazing week 1. Super excited for all the new innovations. Hope they keep coming. And I think that's enough for us today.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone who listened. We will be back on Monday. We are going to look at new brews for Ether Chandler. That is our card of the week. And we're going to take a look back at our Leyline Binding brews from the week before.
Exactly. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much, David. Have a nice night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And tune in on Monday for new decks with Ether Channeler, plus testing results with Leyline Binding. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family and help support the show at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.